The sun was beginning to dip behind the Montana mountains, painting the horizon in warm orange and violet hues. The long drive from Billings to Helena had worn out Sarah. Her car hummed steadily along the empty highway as 3-year-old Lily sat quietly in the back seat, hugging her worn-out stuffed dog named Mr. Barks. For the past 30 minutes, the little girl hadn't said a single word. Normally, she'd be singing to the radio or asking endless questions about clouds and cows and everything else that caught her curious eyes. But not today. Sarah glanced at her daughter through the rearview mirror. Lily's small face looked pale, her big blue eyes distant, as if she were lost in some thought too heavy for someone her age. "Sweetie, you okay back there?" Sarah asked gently. Lily looked up, hesitated, then nodded too quickly. "I'm fine, Mommy." Sarah sighed. The last few weeks had been rough. She worked double shifts at the diner ever since her manager offered her extra hours to make ends meet. Her boyfriend, Tom, had been watching Lily on the weekends. He seemed patient, even caring at first, though something about his overfamiliar way of talking to her daughter had started to make Sarah uncomfortable. But she pushed those feelings away. After all, Tom had helped her when no one else did. The fuel light blinked on the dashboard. Sarah spotted a highway sign, "Rest Stop, 1 mile ahead." "Perfect," she murmured. "We'll stop and stretch a bit, huh, kiddo?" Lily didn't answer. She just held Mr. Barks. The rest stop was nearly empty. A few parked cars, a semi-truck idling in the distance, and a police SUV stationed under a streetlight near the vending machines. The sound of cicadas buzzed faintly in the background as Sarah parked near the edge of the lot. "Come on, sweetheart," Sarah said, unbuckling Lily. "Let's get some air." Lily stepped out slowly, her tiny shoes crunching on the gravel. She looked around, her eyes scanning the surroundings until they fixed on something, or rather someone. A large German shepherd was sitting obediently near the police SUV, his tongue hanging out, chest puffed proudly. His handler, Detective Mark, stood nearby, sipping coffee and scanning his tablet. The K9's vest read Police Dog K9 Unit. Lily froze. Her little fingers gripped her mother's jeans. Sarah smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "Look, honey, a police dog. Isn't he handsome?" But Lily didn't smile. Her gaze was locked on the animal, her lower lip trembling slightly. Mark noticed the child staring and gave a friendly wave. "Hey there, little one," he called softly, trying not to startle her. "You like dogs?" Lily didn't reply. Instead, she took a small step forward, raised her left hand and made a quick motion, her thumb tucked into her palm, fingers curling over it, then held it out for 2 seconds before dropping it. It was so subtle that Sarah barely noticed, but did. His hand stopped midair. His expression shifted instantly from friendly to alert. That hand signal, he'd seen it during child rescue training. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't a greeting. It was the distress gesture taught to victims of abuse or abduction who couldn't speak out loud. Straightened slightly. "Ma'am," he said carefully, walking toward them, "is everything all right?" Sarah blinked, surprised. "Oh, yes, officer, we're just stopping to stretch. Long drive." Nodded, though his eyes were focused on Lily. The little girl had turned pale, clutching her stuffed dog like a shield. He crouched to her level. "Hi there," he said kindly. "My name's Mark. And this here," he pointed to the German shepherd, "this is Max. He's a police dog. He helps me keep people safe. Do you like dogs?" Lily's voice was tiny. "He looks like Mr. Barks." Smiled softly. "Mr. Barks, is that your toy's name?" She nodded, a small flicker of comfort breaking through her fear. Sarah watched, confused. "Officer, is there a problem?" Looked up gently. "Probably not. But I just noticed your daughter made a very specific hand sign a moment ago. Has she ever been taught about what to do if she feels unsafe?" Sarah frowned. "What? No, she's only 3. Hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "That sign, what she just did, it's a recognized distress signal. It's used by children who can't say they need help." The color drained from Sarah's face. "What are you saying?" Before could answer, Lily whispered something so faint he barely caught it. "Tom said don't tell." Sarah froze. "What?" Lily looked down at the gravel, her small voice trembling. "He said I'll get in trouble if I tell." His heartbeat quickened. He'd been in law enforcement for over a decade. He'd seen victims of all ages, but hearing fear like that from a toddler never stopped hurting. He looked at Sarah, whose face was now etched with horror. "Ma'am, I'm not jumping to conclusions, but we need to take this seriously. Can I ask where you're coming from today?" Sarah swallowed hard. We were at Tom's house. I was working last night. He offered to keep her for the weekend." Nodded grimly. "Do you mind if I make a quick call, just routine check-in?" Sarah nodded, still processing. Her hands shook. Stepped away and quietly radioed dispatch, requesting a child welfare check linked to the name Tom Miller, living in the nearby town of Great Falls. Within minutes, dispatch confirmed that Tom had been mentioned in a prior report involving suspected child exploitation, but the case had stalled due to lack of evidence. His jaw clenched. He walked back, crouched beside Lily again, and gently said, "Hey, sweetheart, you did the right thing. You're very brave." Lily didn't answer. She just pressed Mr. Barks against her face. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, tears filling her eyes. "Lily, did something bad happen when you were with Tom?" The little girl hesitated, then pointed at her leg. Noticed faint purple marks under her sock line. His gut twisted. That was enough. He called for Child Protective Services and backup. By the time another patrol car arrived, dusk had deepened. The peaceful rest stop was now buzzing with quiet urgency. Officers spoke in low tones, and a paramedic gently checked Lily for bruises. Sarah sat on the curb, shaking uncontrollably, guilt and fear washing over her in waves. "I didn't know," she kept repeating. "I swear I didn't know." Placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one's blaming you. You brought her here." She gave the signal. That means she still trusts the world enough to ask for help, and that's something. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. She looked at her daughter, wrapped in a soft police blanket, sitting beside Max the K9. Lily had finally smiled, a small, timid smile, as she reached out to pet the dog's head. Watched quietly. He'd seen hardened criminals confess without emotion, but nothing struck him like that small moment of safety in a child's eyes. Later that night, after the report was filed and Lily was taken for medical examination, sat in his cruiser, staring at the empty highway ahead. He couldn't shake the image of that tiny hand signal, the silent cry for help that most people would have missed. One small gesture had opened the door to something far greater. He didn't yet know it, but that roadside encounter would unravel one of the largest child exploitation cases in Montana's history. And the same little girl who gave that signal would one day stand in a courtroom, holding a police dog's leash, and speak words no one would ever forget. But for now, she was just a scared 3-year-old who had done something extraordinary. She had asked for help, and someone had seen it. Detective Mark didn't sleep that night. Even after returning to his small office in Helena, the image of little Lily making that signal haunted him. He'd seen hardened victims freeze in silence, but a 3-year-old who somehow remembered a rescue gesture, that was different. It meant someone had once shown her what danger looked like. At dawn, he reviewed the notes from last night's report, bruising on lower legs and wrists, fear response when mentioning Tom, possible exposure to abuse material. The words felt heavier than any paperwork he'd handled in months. He rubbed his temples, staring at the photograph taken at the rest stop, Lily clutching her stuffed dog, sitting next to Max, the K9. There was something heartbreaking in that photo, the innocence of a child sitting beside the symbol of justice. He knew this case could spiral into something bigger, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Tom Miller wasn't just a bad babysitter. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in the sterile waiting room of the Child Protective Services building. She hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. The coffee in her hand had gone cold hours ago. Inside the small interview room, Lily sat with a child psychologist named Dr. Carson, a calm woman with soft brown eyes and a gentle voice. Max, the police dog, lay at Lily's feet, his warm presence filling the room with silent comfort. "Do you like drawing, Lily?" asked, placing a set of crayons and paper on the table. Lily nodded slowly. "Can you draw your family for me?" Lily picked up a crayon and began sketching. First, she drew a woman with long hair, Mommy. Then she drew herself, smaller, holding hands with her mother. Then, to surprise, she added another figure, a tall man with no face, holding something in his hand. "Lean closer, who's that?" Lily's hand stopped. "Tom." "What's he holding?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "The camera." His heart sank. She exchanged a quiet glance with the observing officer behind the two-way mirror. A few hours later, joined the team at Tom Miller's house. A plain, single-story home on the outskirts of Great Falls. It looked painfully ordinary. The search warrant had been signed that morning, and as the officers approached, Tom appeared at the door, half smiling, wearing pants and a robe. "Morning, officers," he said, trying to sound casual. "What's this about?" Showed the document. "We're here to conduct a welfare check related to allegations involving a minor under your care." Tom's expression changed, just slightly, but caught it, that flicker of panic in the eyes. Inside, the house smelled faintly of bleach and cigarettes. Instinct screamed. He motioned for two officers to check the basement. Tom tried to protest. "Wait, there's nothing down there, it's just storage." But it was too late. When the officers broke the padlock and opened the basement door, the air changed. Dust, damp, and the faint metallic scent of equipment. "Detective," one officer called. Descended the creaky stairs and froze halfway down. The room was dimly lit by a single bulb. On a table sat a video camera, a computer tower, and multiple USB drives. A small mattress was pushed against the corner wall. Children's toys, half broken, mismatched, lay scattered on the floor. The sight made his stomach twist. He looked back at Tom, whose face had turned pale. "You want to explain this?" asked quietly. Tom opened his mouth, but no words came out. Within minutes, officers cuffed him and led him outside. Neighbors watched through curtains as he was placed in the back of a police car. At the precinct, joined the forensics team reviewing the footage recovered from the basement computer. What they found confirmed his worst fears. There were multiple files, hundreds of them. Several showed children frightened and crying. Lily's small voice could be heard in one, begging to go home. Slammed his fist on the table. "Shut it off," he said, his voice breaking. "Shut it off now." The chief of police entered the room, his jaw tight. "We're sending this straight to the FBI's cyber crimes unit. This isn't just one man, Mark. He's connected to a network." Nodded grimly. "Then we hit it fast, before another child ends up there." That evening, Sarah received the news in the worst possible way, through an official briefing. She sat trembling as explained the evidence. I trusted him," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He told me he loved her. He said she was like his own." Placed a hand on the table. "You couldn't have known, Sarah. People like him, they hide behind kindness. But your daughter, she's the reason this came out. That signal she gave, it's saving lives." Sarah shook her head. "She's just a baby. She shouldn't even know what that means." His voice softened. "She knew enough to ask for help. That makes her brave." Over the next few days, investigators traced connections from Tom's computer to an encrypted online group exchanging illegal content. The FBI confirmed similar suspects in neighboring states. A coordinated operation began, all sparked by one tiny hand signal on a quiet highway. But for Sarah and Lily, life was far from normal. Lily had nightmares, screaming in the middle of the night, waking up crying, calling for Max. Sarah would hold her until she fell back asleep, whispering, "You're safe now, baby. You're safe." One afternoon, visited their temporary safe house. Lily was sitting on the porch, coloring a picture of Max wearing a police badge. He smiled gently. "Hey, Officer Lily, what you drawing?" She looked up shyly. "Buddy Dog." Sat beside her. "That's a good name, you know he really likes you." Lily nodded. "He helps me not be scared." Felt a lump form in his throat. "That's what good dogs do." Sarah joined them, her eyes tired but grateful. "Detective, what happens now?" Hesitated. "There'll be a trial. The district attorney wants to charge Tom with multiple counts, but Lily may need to appear as a witness." Sarah's face went pale. "She's just a child, she can't." "She won't be alone," assured her. "We'll find a way to make her feel safe, I promise." Later that night, wrote his final entry in the report. Subject, Lily, 3 years old, displayed courage beyond comprehension. Her signal led to the arrest of suspect Tom Miller and the exposure of a multi-state trafficking network. Recommend trauma-focused support and the use of therapy K9 during all further interviews. He stared at the line for a long moment. Then he added one more sentence. "Sometimes the smallest voice speaks the loudest truth." Weeks passed. The town began to hear whispers of the Rest Stop girl. The media didn't release names, but everyone knew a child had saved others. Meanwhile, Sarah and Lily slowly began to rebuild. Lily spent hours drawing pictures of Max, the police dog she had bonded with. One evening, she handed her mother a drawing of 3 figures, herself, Sarah, and Max, each holding hands. When Sarah asked what it meant, Lily smiled softly. "That's my safe family." For the first time in months, Sarah cried, not out of fear or guilt, but out of relief. Somewhere deep down, she knew their lives would never be the same again. But she also knew one truth. Her little girl had more courage than most adults she knew. And miles away, in his dimly lit office, Detective closed the case file, exhaled slowly, and whispered to himself, "We got him, kid. You did it." The morning after Tom Miller's arrest, Helena Police Headquarters was busier than had ever seen it. Phones rang nonstop, reporters waited outside, and FBI agents filled the briefing room with laptops and evidence folders. It was no longer a local case. Overnight, what began as one child's cry for help had unraveled a multi-state trafficking network operating quietly for years. Stood at the front of the room, staring at the projected images on the wall. Lists of usernames, encrypted messages, bank transfers. It made him sick. One of the FBI agents, Agent Laura, pointed to a digital map marked with red dots. Each dot represents a confirmed IP address connected to Miller's system. "We've got users in 4 states. The same encryption pattern was found in 2 ongoing cases, Seattle and Denver." His jaw tightened. So he wasn't just a participant, he was a distributor. "Worse," Laura replied. "We think he was recruiting victims, using single parents, vulnerable families." His heart sank. He thought of Sarah, exhausted, overworked, desperate for help. Tom had seen that weakness and used it. He glanced at the small evidence bag on his desk, Lily's hand-drawn picture of Max, found in Tom's basement. Her innocent drawing was used as bait in videos to make them seem harmless. Fists clenched. "We stop every last one of them," he said quietly. At the same time, in a secure location across town, Sarah sat in a quiet counseling room with Lily and Dr. Carson. Lily was stacking colored blocks while asked gentle questions. "Do you remember when you saw the police dog, Lily?" Lily nodded, smiling faintly. "Max, he's my friend." Smiled. "That's right. Do you remember what made you do the hand sign?" Lily hesitated, her small fingers fidgeting with a red block. "Tom said don't talk, but Mr. Barks told me I could ask for help, so I did." Sarah looked at her daughter in disbelief. "Honey, who taught you that sign?" Lily shrugged. "I saw it on Mommy's phone once, The lady said, "If you need help, do this." Sarah's breath caught. She remembered scrolling social media weeks ago, seeing a post about the silent help signal but never thinking twice. Lily must have seen it over her shoulder. That simple moment of curiosity had saved her life. 2 days later, the FBI raided 4 locations based on evidence from Tom's devices, joined one of the teams in Great Falls. The scenes were heartbreaking, rooms that looked normal from the outside, but inside were filled with hidden cameras and locked doors. At one location, they found a small pair of pink shoes that didn't belong to any resident. At another, photos of missing children linked to active Amber Alerts. Each discovery made his chest heavier. He had seen darkness before, but this was deeper, colder, more calculated. When the team gathered that night, Laura briefed them. Based on Miller's data logs, we estimate over 20 children were directly affected by his operations. Several are already identified and rescued. The press will call this a miracle case, but we all know what it really is, a reminder of how invisible some monsters can be. Stared at the files, 20 children, 20 families torn apart, and one brave little girl who exposed it all. Meanwhile, Lily's story began spreading, quietly at first, among law enforcement circles, then online. The media didn't know her name, but headlines read, "Toddler's Hand Signal Leads to Multi-State Rescue Operation." The story went viral. Advocacy groups began sharing information about the rescue gesture. Schools and centers added it to their safety lessons. Sarah saw one of the headlines on television and broke into tears. Her daughter's tiny act had started a movement. But stayed cautious. "Public attention is good," he told her, "but it also puts you at risk. We'll keep your identities confidential. For now, Lily's safety comes first." Sarah nodded, but her eyes were filled with both pride and pain. "She's just 3, detective. She doesn't even understand what she did." Smiled softly. "Maybe not, but she understood right from wrong, and that's enough." A week later, was called to testify in an emergency custody hearing to ensure Tom couldn't contact any victims' families. He'd faced murderers, cartel leaders, and traffickers, but testifying in a case involving a toddler's bravery hit differently. When the judge asked about the signal, explained in careful words. She didn't speak, she didn't cry for help out loud. She used her hand, the silent distress sign. That's how I knew something was wrong. That one gesture uncovered what we'd been missing for years. The judge nodded gravely. "Detective, your department's quick response likely prevented more harm." Shook his head. "With respect, Your Honor, I only noticed. She's the one who acted." While the legal machinery turned, Lily continued therapy sessions with Doctor and her now constant companion, Max. The big German shepherd followed her everywhere, even sleeping by her feet during naps. One afternoon, visited and found Lily sitting on the floor, gently brushing Max's fur. He sat down beside her. "Hey, partner, taking care of your teammate." Lily giggled. "He's sleepy, he snores like you." Laughed for the first time in days. "Oh, does he now?" Then Lily said something that froze him. "Mommy said bad people can't hurt me anymore, but what if they try again?" Took a deep breath. "Then you remember what you did before. You showed courage, and you've got Max and a whole team of people now. You're not alone, kiddo." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Max is my hero." Looked at her tiny hand resting on the dog's paw. "Funny thing," he said softly, "I think he'd say the same about you." By early spring, the case became national news. The FBI credited the youngest civilian in U.S. history for triggering one of the largest child protection operations in Montana. But behind the fame was a small child still recovering from trauma. Nights were still difficult for Lily. Sometimes she'd wake up crying, saying, "Don't take Mr. Barks." Each time, Sarah would hold her, whispering softly until she calmed. Yet even through the fear, Lily's spirit shone through. When asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up, Lily answered without hesitation, "A police lady. I'll help the little ones." Overheard that conversation and couldn't stop smiling. "She already is helping them," he whispered to later. "She just doesn't know how much yet." A few weeks later, received a call from the district attorney. The trial for Tom Miller was moving forward. Given the nature of the crimes, they wanted Lily's statement, but not in open court. Instead, they would allow a recorded testimony with Max present, following new trauma-sensitive child protocols. Still, Sarah hesitated. "She's so young, detective. I can't put her through that." Nodded, "I understand, but Lily's voice, however small, will make sure he never hurts anyone again." Sarah looked down, torn between fear and pride. Finally, she said quietly, "If she's ready, then we'll do it." That night watched the sunset from his office, exhausted but hopeful. He took out his notebook and wrote a line. "You never know how strong someone is until strength is their only choice. And sometimes, that someone is 3 years old." He closed the notebook, turned off the light and smiled faintly. Lily had done what entire departments struggled to do for years. She had seen evil, and through her courage, given countless other children a chance to be free. And though the road ahead would still be long, knew one thing for certain. The smallest signal had started something unstoppable. The courthouse in Helena, Montana, had never seen security this tight. The upcoming trial of Tom Miller was drawing national attention. Outside, news vans lined the street. Inside, every corridor echoed with whispers and camera clicks. But in a small room tucked behind the courtroom, the atmosphere was entirely different. There sat Lily, cross-legged on the carpet, holding a tiny toy badge, and beside her, Max, the police dog who had found her. His calm eyes followed her every movement, his ears twitching at every sound. Detective stood near the door, watching quietly as Dr. Carson guided Lily through another practice day. "Okay, sweetheart," said gently, pointing toward a camera set up in the corner. "This is the room where you'll talk when we go to the courthouse. Remember, you won't see any bad people. You'll just talk to me and Max." Lily nodded, "Like now." "Exactly like now," smiled. "You can even bring your crayons if that helps." Lily grinned, showing a crayon-stained hand. "Max likes blue." Chuckled under his breath. "Guess the dog's got taste." But beneath the warmth of the moment was a tension none of them could ignore. Even with the child-friendly setup, the idea of a 3-year-old giving testimony, no matter how gentle the process, was heavy. After the session ended, stepped into the hallway with Sarah. "She's stronger than I expected," admitted. "But we have to be careful. Even a single memory can trigger trauma." Sarah nodded, her face pale. "She doesn't talk about him much. She just says the mean man. I don't want her to remember more." Looked down. "She already did enough remembering to save herself and others. Now our job is to protect her." The following week, met with District Attorney Ellen Price, a seasoned prosecutor known for her no-nonsense approach. Her office was stacked with files and court documents, each one representing a victim or a piece of evidence. Ellen adjusted her glasses as entered. "Detective, I've reviewed your reports. The digital evidence is airtight, but Miller's lawyer is pushing for an insanity plea. They'll try to discredit everything, including the child's statement." Frowned. "He's sane enough to encrypt files and manage a trafficking ring. Don't tell me that's insanity." Ellen sighed. "I agree, but juries are unpredictable, which is why I want Lily's recorded testimony to be flawless. It'll humanize the case." Hesitated. "She's only 3, Ellen. She doesn't even understand half of what happened." "Maybe not," Ellen replied, "but she understands fear and courage. That's what jurors will feel." There was a long silence before nodded. "Then we make sure she's ready. No surprises, no pressure." Ellen softened slightly. "I trust you to handle that, detective. You've been her anchor." Gave a small smile. "She's been mine too." At home, Sarah struggled to balance between protecting her daughter and preparing her for what was coming. Every time she saw the news, reporters replaying clips of the hand signal that saved lives, her stomach tightened. She wanted to be proud, but it all felt too public, too raw. One night as she tucked Lily into bed, the little girl asked softly, "Mommy, will the bad man see me?" Sarah froze. "No, sweetheart, you'll be safe, remember. You'll be in a special room with Max." Lily looked relieved, then whispered, "Can Max talk to the judge for me?" Sarah smiled sadly. "I think Max already knows what you want to say." Outside the door had been standing quietly, listening. He stopped by to drop off some paperwork, but hearing that exchange hit him harder than any crime scene ever had. He turned away, blinking back the sting in his eyes. Over the next 2 weeks, the courthouse transformed into a fortress. Every entrance was guarded, every corridor cleared before Lily and Max were allowed to enter. The media never saw her face, only a small hand clutching a leash and a golden-furred German shepherd walking proudly beside her. Inside, technicians set up the child witness room, a small, softly lit space equipped with recording equipment and toys. The camera would stream her testimony live to the courtroom, where the judge, lawyers, and jury would watch from another room. Before the big day, brought Max to the courthouse several times to get Lily comfortable. She feed him treats, laugh when he sneezed, and even sing to him softly. The bond between them grew deeper each day. On one visit, Ellen stopped by to observe. "You know," she said quietly too, "we should make therapy dogs standard in every child testimony case. This," she gestured to the pair on the floor, "this is what safety looks like." Nodded. "He's her armor, she doesn't even realize it." The night before the recording, no one slept much. Sat at his desk, rereading the case file. Every detail, every photograph reminded him of how fragile justice could be, and how a child's courage had stitched it together. Sarah stayed up beside Lily's bed, watching her sleep. At 2 a.m., Lily stirred and murmured, "Max will be there, right?" Sarah brushed her hair back gently, "Always." And in that moment, Sarah knew this wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming safety, faith, and childhood itself. The next morning, the courthouse was eerily silent when Lily arrived. Reporters were kept blocks away. Inside, Ellen, and stood waiting as the small girl walked in holding Max's leash. She wore a light blue dress and a tiny pink ribbon, the same one she'd worn the day she was rescued. Knelt beside her. "You ready, Lily?" Lily nodded, though her eyes darted nervously to the camera. "Will they see me?" "Only the nice people," said softly, "the ones who help." Added, "And Max will stay right here. He won't let anything bad happen." With a deep breath that seemed far too steady for her age, Lily took her seat on the small cushion next to Max. She reached out and rested her hand on his head. "Hi, Max," she whispered. "We can do this." Felt something shift in the room, an unspoken strength. As the session began, Ellen's gentle voice came through the speaker. "Lily, can you tell us your name?" "Lily." "And who's sitting next to you?" "Max, he's my police friend." The jurors watching from the other room smiled despite themselves. Ellen continued, careful not to pressure her. "Do you remember a man named Tom?" Lily's hand trembled slightly. Max nuzzled her arm, grounding her. "Yes," she whispered. "He said I can't talk, but Max said I can." "Can you tell us what Max said to you?" Lily looked up at the camera. "He said, 'Brave girls talk.'" Swallowed hard. Even Ellen had to pause to steady her voice. Lily continued, her tiny voice calm but clear. "I showed my hand like this." She raised her palm, thumb tucked in, fingers closing over it because the lady on Mommy's phone said it means help me. Then Mr. came, and Max came too. There was silence in the courtroom as the video played. Even the judge lowered her gaze for a moment, visibly moved. When the session ended, Lily leaned against Max and sighed as if she just carried the weight of the world. walked in, kneeling beside her. "You did amazing, partner," he said softly. Lily smiled sleepily. "Can we go get ice cream now?" Laughed, "You earned a whole store." Sarah, standing nearby, finally let out a long breath she'd been holding for weeks. She hugged her daughter tightly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm so proud of you, baby." Lily smiled. "Did we win?" Sarah whispered, "We will." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, stayed behind in the empty courtroom. The faint echo of the child's voice still lingered in his mind. He looked at Max, who was lying quietly near the witness stand. "You did good, boy," he murmured. "You both did." For once, allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt since the case began: hope. Because in a world full of noise, lies, and darkness, one little girl had spoken the loudest truth of all, without ever raising her voice. End of Part 4. Next, Part 5, The Trial, where the courtroom sees the impact of Lily's words. Shocking revelations emerge, and the verdict changes more than one life. The first day of the State v. Tom Miller trial began under heavy clouds. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, broadcasting live updates as if it were a national event. Every headline screamed the same phrase: "Toddler's testimony sparks national child protection reform." Inside, however, the mood was grave. The courtroom was packed with attorneys, agents, and families of victims. The air was thick with quiet anger and restrained grief. Detective Daniel sat in the front row behind the prosecution's table. He wasn't just a witness. He was the one who'd followed the first trail, the one who'd believed a child's silent signal. He'd faced hardened criminals before, but this time felt different. This was personal. At the far end of the room, Tom Miller sat in a dark suit, flanked by his defense attorney. His face was blank, expressionless, almost bored, as if none of it mattered. That calmness, that quiet arrogance made blood boil. District Attorney Ellen Price adjusted her papers and leaned toward. "Stay steady. Don't let him see you react." Nodded, but his eyes stayed locked on Miller. "He won't get to hide behind silence this time," he muttered. When court began, the judge's voice echoed through the chamber. "This case involves multiple counts of child endangerment, exploitation, and unlawful confinement. The jury is reminded that graphic evidence will be presented. You may step out if necessary." One by one, the prosecution called witnesses, FBI agents, cybercrime analysts, and child protection officers. They laid out the evidence: encrypted files, digital money trails, and photographs that made even the most stoic jurors shift in discomfort. Then finally, Ellen said, "The prosecution would like to present Exhibit 47, the recorded testimony of the minor, referred to as Lily." The lights dimmed. The video began. On screen, the little girl appeared sitting cross-legged on a soft carpet, Max beside her. The courtroom went utterly still. "Hi, Max," Lily's voice said. "We can do this." Even who'd watched it before felt his throat tighten. Her voice was small but strong, unshaken. Ellen's recorded voice came from the video. "Can you tell us who Tom is?" Lily hesitated on screen, then whispered, "He's the man who said don't talk, but I talked anyway." A faint gasp rippled through the courtroom. "And what did Max tell you, Lily?" "He said brave girls talk." That single sentence hit harder than any piece of evidence. In the front row, one of the jurors, a middle-aged woman, quietly wiped her eyes. When the video ended, there was silence. Even the judge had to take a brief pause before speaking. Let the record show the testimony was delivered voluntarily and without prompting. Ellen nodded respectfully. "Your Honor, the child's signal and testimony led directly to the discovery of 23 victims across 4 states. That courage deserves acknowledgement." The judge glanced toward. "Detective, please take the stand." Walked up, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. As he took the oath and sat, Ellen approached with calm authority. "Detective, please explain how you first encountered the child." Took a breath. I was at a rest stop outside Helena. I saw a man and a young girl. The girl looked nervous, quiet, but she made a hand signal I recognized, a distress sign that means help me. She did it once quick. If I hadn't seen it, I might missed it entirely. What did you do then? I followed protocol, called for backup, engaged the suspect calmly, and retrieved the child safely. Ellen stepped closer. And during that moment, Detective, did the child say anything? Smiled faintly, just 2 words. She looked at my K-9 partner, Max, and said, "He knows." That was all I needed. Ellen turned to the jury. Ladies, and sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truth. Murmurs rippled through the room again, but gaze remained fixed on Miller, who, for the first time, looked uneasy. His fingers twitched against the table. When it was the defense's turn, Miller's attorney, Graham Holt, stood. His tone was cold. "Detective, isn't it true that a 3-year-old's memory can be unreliable?" Didn't flinch. Maybe, but fear doesn't lie. And she wasn't just remembering, she was signaling in real time. The defense pushed harder. "So you acted based on a hand movement. No words, no confirmation." Leaned forward slightly. "That hand movement saved her life and 22 others. I'd act on it again 1,000 times." The jurors nodded almost imperceptibly. Holt sat down, defeated. After hours of evidence, the defense made its last attempt. They called Tom Miller himself to testify. The room grew cold as he took the stand. "Mr. Miller," his lawyer began, "can you explain your side of this story?" Miller's voice was calm, disturbingly composed. "I help people, single mothers. I provided shelter, food, protection. I've been painted as a monster, but that's not who I am." Clenched his fists. He'd heard enough lies in his life, but none that burned like this. Ellen rose from her seat for the cross-examination. "Protection," she repeated. "You call locking children in hidden rooms protection?" Miller smirked faintly. "You don't understand what these kids needed." Ellen's voice sharpened. What they needed was freedom. What they needed was safety. And it took a 3-year-old to stop you because every adult you manipulated was too afraid. The smirk faded. For the first time, Miller's mask cracked. Ellen held up a photograph, the same one found in his basement, Lily's drawing of Max. "You used this to lure families in, didn't you?" Miller's eyes flickered. Silence. "That's enough," Ellen said firmly. "You've said all the wrong things already." When the closing arguments began, the courtroom was tense. Ellen stood before the jury, her voice steady but full of emotion. "This isn't just about one child or one predator. This is about the courage to speak when you're told to be silent. That little girl, barely old enough to read, broke a chain that stretched across states. She didn't do it with weapons or technology. She did it with her hand and her heart." She paused, glancing toward. And sometimes justice begins with someone small enough to remind us what bravery looks like. The defense tried to argue insanity, coercion, mental instability, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming and the human impact undeniable. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The room fell silent as the foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Tom Miller, guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted in tears and gasps. Sarah gripped his arm tightly, shaking. He looked over at Ellen, who gave a small nod of relief. As the bailiffs moved to take Miller away, he glanced once toward. But this time, there was no arrogance, only defeat. Outside, the sky broke open with sunlight for the first time in weeks. Later that afternoon, visited Sarah and Lily at the safe house. Lily was sitting on the floor, stacking blocks beside Max. When she saw, she jumped up and ran to him. "Did we win?" she asked eagerly. Knelt smiling. "Yes, partner, you did." Lily giggled and handed him a crayon drawing, a stick figure of herself, Max, and a tall man in a badge. "That's you," she said proudly. Looked at it for a long moment. "It's perfect." Sarah's eyes shimmered. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already did," said softly. "You let her be brave." That night, as drove home, he turned on the radio. Every station was talking about the case. Experts called it a defining moment for child advocacy in America. But for it wasn't about headlines or reform. It was about one small girl and a hand signal that changed everything. He parked, looked out at the sunset, and whispered to himself, "Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers." And in that whisper, he heard the echo of Lily's voice. Brave girls talk. The trial was over, but the echoes of it lingered across Helena and far beyond. News anchors repeated the story for days, calling it the Signal case. Social media overflowed with images of the rescue sign, a raised palm, thumb tucked, fingers closed. Millions of people shared it, teaching their children what it meant. For many, it was just a viral symbol. For Detective Daniel, it was the image that would stay with him forever, a 3-year-old silent cry for help that had shattered an entire criminal ring. But now, as he sat in his car outside the courthouse, the reality of what came next began to sink in. Justice had been served, yet healing, real healing, would take much longer. A week after the verdict, drove to a quiet rehabilitation ranch outside Helena. The place was open, green, and peaceful, the kind of place where laughter could echo again without fear. He found Sarah sitting on the porch swing, a warm breeze moving through her hair. Inside, through the screen door, Lily was playing with crayons and Max, the faithful police dog who had now been permanently assigned to Sarah and Lily as part of a therapy program. Sarah smiled faintly when she saw him. "You actually showed up on time, Detective. That's a first." Grinned, "Figured I'd try something new. How's she doing?" "Better," Sarah said, her smile faltering slightly. "She's sleeping through most nights now. The nightmares are less frequent. She still clings to Max when it storms, though." Nodded, glancing inside. "Storms used to scare me too," he said softly. "You always think they'll never end." Sarah looked down. "You don't stop them by hiding," she murmured. "You stop them by surviving." There was silence between them, the kind of silence that meant understanding, not distance. Inside, Lily was crouched beside Max, whispering as she drew on a large sheet of paper. When knelt down beside her, she looked up and beamed. "Look, mister, I made a happy ending." He tilted his head. On the paper were 3 stick figures, Lily, her mom, and Max standing under a rainbow. Above them, written in shaky letters, were 3 words, "We are safe." Felt his chest tighten. "That's beautiful, Lily." "Do you think the other kids are safe too?" she asked innocently. He hesitated because she was asking about the rescued children from the case, and the truth was complicated. Some were still in hospitals, others in foster care. But he smiled gently. "They're safe now. You helped them get there." Lily's eyes sparkled. "Then Max and me did a good job." "The best," said quietly. Over the next month, visited often. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to talk. The ranch became a sanctuary, a place where pain slowly began turning into purpose. Dr. Carson also continued Lily's therapy sessions, now focused on rebuilding confidence through play and animal bonding. Lily had started riding a small therapy horse named Daisy, her laughter ringing across the fields. "She's a natural," told one afternoon as they watched her from the fence. "You know, she's not just healing, she's leading." Smiled faintly. "I've seen grown men break under less. That kid made of something else." Nodded. "She's brave because she was believed. That makes all the difference." Meanwhile, the media attention didn't fade. Offers came in for interviews, documentaries, even books, but Sarah refused them all. "My daughter doesn't need to be a symbol," she told firmly. "She needs to be a child." He respected that. Still, the case was reshaping the country. Within months, several states introduced signal awareness programs, educational campaigns teaching children and adults the silent hand gesture for distress. Schools incorporated it into safety drills. Police departments received new training on how to recognize nonverbal signs of abuse. And though Lily's name was never made public, her story became the heart of a quiet revolution. One day, received a letter from the Department of Justice inviting him to Washington, D.C., to receive a commendation for exceptional service and recognition of child protection leadership. He smiled when he read it, but didn't feel right celebrating alone. So the next weekend, he returned to the ranch. When he told Sarah about the invitation, she laughed softly. "You deserve it." Shook his head. "The person who deserves it can't even spell commendation." Sarah smiled knowingly. "You mean the little artist in the living room?" "Exactly." Later that afternoon, he knelt beside Lily. "Hey, partner, they want me to go get a shiny medal for helping you." Lily's eyes widened. "Like a superhero medal?" "Something like that." "Then Max and me should get one too," she giggled. Grinned. "You know what, you're right." A week later, in a small ceremony at the Helena Police Department, made sure that happened. In front of a small audience of officers, he handed Lily a simple silver medallion engraved with the words, "For courage beyond words." Max got a matching collar tag. The crowd clapped, many wiping tears from their eyes. Lily held up her medal proudly and whispered, "We did it, Max." Smiled, "Yes, you did." Months passed, the seasons changed. Life began to return to normal, or at least something close to it. Sarah got a new job with a local nonprofit that helped families in crisis. Her experience gave her empathy few could match. She used her story not to dwell on pain, but to guide others out of it. One evening she told, "You know, before all this, I used to think heroes were people in uniforms or movies. Now I know sometimes they're just small hands waving for help." Nodded quietly, "And sometimes they're moms who don't give up." By the following spring, Lily had become a symbol of something far larger than anyone expected. Advocacy groups began referring to the hand signal as Lily's signal. The gesture spread to schools, online platforms, and community centers across the country. Watched from afar as the movement grew. He didn't chase interviews or praise. He didn't need to. The real victory was seeing other children protected before harm could reach them. One evening, he got an email from a police officer in California. The subject line read, "Your signal saved another child today." Sat back, overwhelmed. He thought of Lily's tiny hand closing over her thumb, the bravery it took, and how that single motion had rippled across the nation. 6 months after the trial, visited the ranch again. Lily was 4 now, a little taller, a little bolder. She came running to him the moment she saw his car. "Mister, guess what?" "What?" "I'm going to preschool next week." Smile was wide. "That's amazing, you ready for it?" She nodded eagerly. "Mommy says I can tell stories there. I'm gonna tell them about Max." He laughed. "I think Max would like that." Then, as she turned to chase the dog across the yard, looked at Sarah. "She's thriving." "She's healing," Sarah corrected gently, "and so am I." For a long moment, they just watched Lily play, sunlight glinting off her little silver medal, laughter floating through the air. Finally said, "You know, sometimes I still think about that day. If I'd been a second slower, or if she hadn't made that sign." Sarah cut him off softly. "Then maybe someone else would have, because when courage exists, it finds a way out." Nodded, his eyes soft. "You're right, and that courage started here." He pointed toward the small child chasing Max in the grass, a living, breathing miracle. As the sun dipped below the hills, turned to leave. Lily ran up, hugging his leg tightly. "Bye, mister. Don't forget Max's medal next time." He chuckled. "I won't, partner. Keep being brave." She grinned, then lifted her hand, palm out, thumb tucked, fingers closing, the signal that had once saved her life. But this time it wasn't a plea for help. It was a sign of strength. returned the gesture with a salute and whispered, "Loud and clear, kiddo." Then he got into his car and drove away, the image of the little girl and her dog shrinking in his mirror, but never leaving his heart. A year after the trial, Helena, Montana, no longer felt like the same small town. The courthouse that once echoed with fear and tension now stood as a quiet monument to courage. People who passed by often remembered the story of a little girl who had raised her hand in a way that changed everything. Detective Daniel still visited the ranch sometimes. He'd bring treats for Max or new sketchbooks for Lily, who was now in preschool and already known by her teachers as the girl with big stories. Every visit felt like watching sunlight heal a shadow that had once seemed endless. But beyond the ranch, something much larger was unfolding. Across the United States, the simple hand gesture, palm out, thumb tucked, fingers folded, had become a national symbol. It was called Lily's Signal. Police departments from Seattle to Miami began including it in their training manuals. Schools started showing it during morning assemblies. Airlines even played brief instructional videos about it before takeoff, right after the demonstration. The impact was astonishing. Within months, dozens of reports came in of people, mostly women and children, using the signal to escape dangerous situations. One story from Chicago stood out. A 12-year-old girl trapped in a moving car with a man she barely knew flashed the signal at a passing driver. The driver recognized it immediately, called 911, and followed the vehicle until police intercepted it. That girl was rescued safely. When the news aired, one reporter said, "It all began with a little girl in Montana who couldn't speak her fear, so she spoke with her hands." The country listened. The signal wasn't just a story anymore, it had become a movement. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Senator Porter introduced a bill called the Child Silent Rescue Act. It aimed to make Lily's Signal part of nationwide emergency education. She mentioned the Helena case in her speech before Congress, her voice steady but emotional. When a 3-year-old can do what many adults cannot, find a way to ask for help in silence, that's not just bravery. That's humanity's voice, and we owe it to her to listen. When the bill passed, received a letter of thanks from the senator's office. But instead of pride, he felt something deeper, peace. Because every law passed, every training held, every child saved, all of it meant one thing: what Lily had suffered would not be in vain. At the ranch, life continued gently. Sarah worked full-time at the nonprofit, helping survivors rebuild their lives. Lily had adjusted to school better than anyone expected. She was cheerful, creative, and endlessly curious, though occasionally Sarah caught her staring quietly at nothing, as if remembering something the world had forgotten. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, Sarah heard soft giggles coming from Lily's room. She peeked in to find her daughter sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding Max's head in her lap, whispering secrets to him. "What you about, sweetheart?" Sarah asked. Lily looked up, smiling. "Max said we should help other kids who are scared. Can we do that, Mommy?" Sarah hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because her heart clenched at the purity of the request. "You already did, honey," she said softly. "But I want to help more," Lily insisted. "Max said brave kids should share bravery." Sarah smiled, kneeling beside her. "Then maybe we can. Maybe we can tell stories not about what happened, but about hope." That night, an idea began forming. Months later, the idea became real. Sarah launched a small community project called the Brave Hearts Program. It started with just a few families, offering counseling, safety workshops, and emotional support for children who had been through trauma. But word spread quickly. Soon, donations came in, volunteers signed up, and a national children's charity partnered with her to expand it across the state. Lily, of course, was the unofficial mascot. Her drawings, always bright, always full of rainbows and dogs, became the logo for the project. Beneath every image were the words she had once written in crayon: "We are safe." During one of their first workshops, a little boy refused to speak. He sat in silence, trembling, while the volunteers tried gently to comfort him. Then Lily, without saying a word, sat beside him, folded her thumb into her palm and made the signal her signal. The boy blinked, then slowly her motion. And for the first time in weeks he spoke, "Help." The room fell silent. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. That single moment, two small hands mirroring each other, became the essence of everything they stood for. Detective attended the first annual Brave Hearts Conference that year as a guest speaker. The event hall was filled with parents, teachers, police officers, and survivors. At the front row sat Sarah and Lily, Max at their feet, tail thumping softly against the floor. When took the stage, the applause was thunderous. But instead of talking about his career or the investigation, he began with a simple story. "I've worked in law enforcement for 20 years, he said, his voice low but steady. "I've seen people at their worst and their best, but I've never seen anything more powerful than a child who refuses to be silent." He paused, looking at Lily. "She taught me something I'll never forget, that courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through small hands and steady hearts." The audience was motionless. Some were crying, others smiling, but everyone felt the same truth ripple through the room. After the conference, a woman approached. She introduced herself as Melissa Grant, a school teacher from Texas. "My class learned the signal last month," she said, tears in her eyes. "And last week, one of my students used it. We found out she was being hurt at home. Because of that little hand sign, we got her out safely." Felt the air catch in his throat. He shook her hand quietly, unable to find the right words. As Melissa walked away, he looked toward Lily again, spinning in circles with other kids, her laughter bright, free, unstoppable. Months rolled into another year. The media continued to celebrate Lily's signal as one of the most influential safety campaigns of the decade. There were children's books inspired by her story, fictionalized, of course, to protect her identity, and the Brave Hearts program spread to more than 10 states. Through it all, Sarah kept her promise. She shielded Lily from the spotlight. Her daughter deserved a childhood, not a headline. But no matter how far the movement reached, everyone close to it knew one truth. It all began with one child, one moment of fear, and one silent act of bravery. One spring morning, as cherry blossoms fluttered in the ranch's yard, stopped by again. Lily ran out with Max, her hair flying in the wind. "Mister," she shouted, laughing, "I'm 6 now." Chuckled, "6 already? That's dangerous, you're growing faster than Max." "Mom says brave hearts grow faster," she said proudly. Sarah joined them on the porch, her face glowing with quiet contentment. "We're planning to move next year," she said, "to Seattle. There's a Brave Hearts Center opening there." Smiled warmly, "That's perfect, a new start." Lily tugged his sleeve. "Will you still visit us?" "Always," he said. "You and Max are my best partners." That evening, as drove home, the sun dipped behind the Montana hills, painting the sky in gold and rose. He thought about all that had changed, how a single moment of courage had sparked reform, saved lives, and taught a nation to listen to silence. He rolled down the window, letting the wind rush in. Somewhere in the distance, he could still hear Lily's laughter. And for the first time in years, the world felt right. 10 years had passed since that day in the courtroom. 10 years since a trembling 3-year-old girl had raised her tiny hand in silence and changed the course of so many lives. The world had moved on, but in some places, in classrooms, hospitals, and homes, the echo of that moment still lived. Lily Anderson was now 13. She had her mother's quiet strength and her own steady confidence. Her smile was the same, soft, curious, full of light, but her eyes carried a wisdom that most adults never achieved. She no longer remembered every detail of the trauma she'd survived. Her memories came like faded sketches, a dark room, a strange voice, the weight of fear, but the warmth that had followed was vivid. She remembered Max's fur under her fingers. She remembered Detective's reassuring voice. And she remembered the hand's signal, her signal, though now it meant something different, hope. The day that brought everything full circle began quietly, under a sky streaked with spring clouds. Sarah parked their car in front of the Helena courthouse, the same one they had left behind a decade ago. The building had changed little, though a new plaque glimmered near the entrance. Lily stepped out, her long brown hair fluttering in the breeze. "It looks smaller than I remember," she said softly. Sarah smiled. "That's because you're bigger now." "Why are we here?" Sarah hesitated, then pointed toward the steps where a small crowd was gathering. Reporters, families, and police officers stood around a covered monument. A blue ribbon flapped gently in the wind. "They're unveiling something today," she said. "Something important." Lily squinted. "Is it about the signal?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, it's about you." Inside, the courthouse was buzzing with life. Familiar faces greeted them: community leaders, social workers, teachers, and several officers in uniform. But one face stood out most: Detective Daniel, now gray at the temples, his posture still firm but his expression softer than ever. When he saw Lily, his eyes brightened. "If it isn't my old partner," he said warmly. Lily ran to hug him and he laughed, lifting her off the ground briefly. "You've grown taller than Max." "Where is he?" she asked. His eyes softened. "He passed away last winter peacefully." Lily's smile wavered, then she nodded. "He was a hero." "He was," agreed, "just like the little girl he protected." When the ceremony began, a hush fell over the crowd. Senator Porter, the same woman who had pushed for the Child Silent Rescue Act, took the stage. "10 years ago," she began, "a story reached every corner of this country, a story about a child who couldn't speak her pain, but found a way to be heard." The crowd listened intently as she spoke about how Lily's signal had saved hundreds of lives, how the Brave Hearts program now operated in all 50 states, and how schools across the nation began teaching empathy and awareness as core lessons. Then she gestured toward the plaque hidden beneath the blue cloth. "This monument," she said, "is dedicated to the courage that started it all, the courage of a child, a mother, and a dog who reminded us that silence can still speak." As she tugged the ribbon free, the cloth fell away, revealing a bronze sculpture. It showed a small hand raised in the signal, palm out, thumb tucked, fingers closing. Beneath it, engraved in neat letters, were the words, "Lily's signal, because every hand can speak." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. But Lily just stood there, frozen, staring at the sculpture that bore her legacy. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay, honey?" Lily nodded slowly. "I just didn't think something so small could become so big." Smiled from beside them. "That's how all big things begin." After the ceremony, people came up to thank her. A woman with kind eyes introduced herself as Rachel, a school counselor from Florida. "I wanted to meet you," she said. 2 years ago, one of my students used your signal in class. Because of that, she's safe now. She sends her love." Another man, a paramedic, told Sarah how the gesture had helped him identify an abused teenager during a 911 call. "We train every first responder to recognize it," he said proudly. Every story was a reflection, different faces, different lives, but the same shared thread. Lily's bravery had become a beacon. Later that evening, after the crowd dispersed, Lily walked through the quiet courthouse hall. Her footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor. She stopped outside Courtroom 3, the same room where it had all happened. The doors were closed, but she peered through the glass window. It was empty now, no judge, no jury, no fear. Just sunlight spilling across the wooden benches. For a moment, she imagined her younger self sitting there, small, trembling, clutching Max's fur for comfort. She imagined the confusion, the fear, the courage that had somehow found its way through her tiny hands. And then she whispered, "Thank you." To herself, to Max, to the little girl who had refused to stay silent. Found her a few minutes later, still standing in the hallway. "You know," he said softly, "I come here every year, just to remember what this place became because of you." Lily turned to him. "Do you ever get tired of remembering?" He smiled faintly. "Not when the memories remind me what good can come out of pain." She looked down. "I still feel scared sometimes." "That's okay," said. "Courage isn't about never being scared. It's about standing tall even when you are." Lily thought for a moment, like Max did. He nodded, exactly like Max did. Outside, the sun dipped low over the courthouse, painting the sky in gold and violet. The three of them, Lily, Sarah, and stood together near the statue. Reporters had left. The crowd was gone, but the air still held something sacred, the quiet power of a story that had come full circle. Sarah wrapped her arm around her daughter. "You've done more for this world than most people do in a lifetime," she whispered. Lily smiled shyly. "I didn't do it alone." Placed a hand on her shoulder. "No one ever does." That night they visited Max's grave on the ranch. The grass had grown tall around the small wooden marker that read, "Max, the dog who listened." Lily knelt beside it, placing a small drawing she'd made, the same image she'd drawn years ago. 3 figures under a rainbow, with the words, "We are safe." "Hey, buddy," she whispered, "you did good." A soft wind brushed through the trees, almost like a sigh of approval. Years later, when Lily was an adult, the hand signal would still be taught in classrooms across the world. It would appear in posters, safety manuals, and children's shows. But whenever people asked where it came from, they'd always hear the same story about a little girl, a police dog, and a courtroom filled with silence that turned into hope. And somewhere in Montana, on that same quiet ranch, the statue at the courthouse would still stand, bronze hand raised against the sky, reminding everyone that courage doesn't need words to be heard. As the final light of evening faded, looked at Sarah and Lily one last time. "You know," he said softly, "this world's a lot safer because of one small hand." Sarah nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. And Lily, now older, stronger, radiant with quiet confidence, raised her hand once more, palm open, thumb tucked, fingers closing. But this time, it wasn't a rescue signal. It was a promise,